Shall we give it another minute, Finn, and then we'll get going, do you think? Or
Yeah, one more minute.
okay.
Morning, Matt. Perfect. I reckon let's do it, Linda.
Okay, great. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Linda, and I'm the Policy and Programs Manager at TICSA or TIC SA. Some of you may have known or know Christina. She has welcomed a new addition to her family, and so I've stepped into her role for the next 12 months while she gets to enjoy that special time with her new baby. Also, we've got Finn with us from TICSA as well. She's our kind of Zoom tech wizard up in the corner there. This is my first time doing an in-conversation, so I certainly need her today to hold my hand and keep me on the right track. So I will just take a few housekeeping sort of matters, get across those. It's around keeping your microphone on mute, but Finn will keep a sort of an eagle eye on that anyway. If you do have any questions though, please use the chat function to pop those questions in or comments in, and we will make sure that we've got some time at the end so that we can address those questions if we don't answer them in the course of the conversation. And this session is for live viewing only. Is that correct, Finn? I did say we are recording. Will we be distributing this? So we will be making it available at the end. So it is not for live viewing only. It will also be recorded, and you can go back or share it with your teammates or your colleagues. Our guest speaker today is Maz McGann, I should say, and I'd love to warmly welcome her to our In Conversation. And Maz is from an organisation called Play Your Part, which is an arts, culture, community and heritage consultancy located in the beautiful Barossa Valley, but she does work across the state. And she works with a whole range of different clients to develop projects and strategies relating to, cultural development, artistic endeavours, and community development. And today she's here to really assist us on our journey of connecting the dots between tourism and the arts and cultural sector by sharing her experiences, stories and tips. And we're really going to try and delve into Maz's expert brain there and provide some knowledge and information that will hopefully be of use to you and your businesses. The In Conversation that we're running is part of a broader arts and cultural tourism capabilities program that we're delivering in partnership with Arts SA. And through this program, we hope to see outcomes that deliver on the goals of the state's arts and cultural tourism strategy, which ultimately aims to see growth in the visitor economy by visitors to South Australia and from South Australia who are, holidaying across South Australia, engaging with our really rich and iconic and really broad range of arts and cultural offerings that are out there. Some of you may have come along to the Arts and Tourism Conference that we had in May, or our Arts and Cultural Tourism Networking event last week. And so there are other activities under this partnership. And then moving forward, we're going to be delivering a tourism awareness and capabilities program for the arts and cultural sector organisations that really want to step into the tourism space. But today, we're delving into the arts and cultural side of the world to really unpack what this means. Many of you, in tourism businesses, we're very focused on tourism. And tourism and arts and culture are very aligned in a desire to share exceptional and authentic experiences that enrich people's lives. But often we can feel like we're talking different languages, and certainly there are different languages within both sectors. And so today is a chance for you guys to get a real understanding of what the arts and cultural sector is, what it comprises, to build your knowledge, to break down some of the myths about working with artists or cultural organisations, and also maybe spark some ideas for how you could bring arts and cultural experiences or expertise into your own businesses. So we're going to dig into it. And to start with, Maz, can you please just broadly tell us about you, your background, and the type of work that you do through Play Your Part?
Thanks, Linda. Good morning, everyone. And it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you. I just want to firstly acknowledge the Indigenous owners on the land. I'm coming to you from Pyramid country in the Barossa, but I always love Zoom and the fact that we're coming from so many different places. So just pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Look, I have been working in my own consultancy for about just over 7 years now in arts and cultural management, essentially, but do drift into lots of different areas. So, education, health and tourism are the sort of probably most common areas I sort of cross over, but work with lots of different organisations and councils around strategic planning, looking at cultural venues, activation, placemaking, writing plans, managing events still a little bit, although I find that as I get a bit older, I find that all a bit exhausting, but, still worthwhile. So quite diverse really, but work with a whole range of clients, certainly mostly in South Australia, but certainly a few interstate as well. I've worked in Victoria and New South Wales, and I do quite a bit of work on the Sunshine Coast actually, which is a interesting cultural tourism case study all of its own up there.
Thanks, Maz. And thanks too for doing that really important acknowledgement of country. And it's an oversight of mine not to have done that to begin with. I'm coming from Ghana country, and, welcome to everyone today too who are coming from all of the various First Nation lands from across South Australia, and we acknowledge and respect all elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for reminding us, Maz, of the importance of that, and it's probably actually a really great thing for us to consider as part of today's session. That these are small but important steps that we can bring into how we do our business as a way of bringing culture in, but also to acknowledging the important First Nation communities in South Australia. So I apologise for that oversight, but thank you for demonstrating one example. But before we go too deep, I think we should get on the same page here. When we say arts and culture, what or who are we talking about?
Sure. $1 million question, really, one that usually requires a couple of bottles of red wine in my experience to reach some sort of agreement. But given that it's definitely not red wine time. Look, it's interesting. They are quite different. I think in lots of, even within the arts and cultural sector itself, people just sort of lump them together and interchange them as though it's sort of all the same thing. For me, arts is really quite a tangible experiences, or that are creative in nature, and they're usually sort of an interpretation of a whole range of things. They're a way of communicating, but they're either an experience or a tangible sort of artifact, using a multitude of methodologies and ways of creating. So again, a lot of people think of arts as pictures on walls. That's, even I often default to that. And someone talks about art, I think about artwork as in a painting on a wall, but it takes in such a massive breadth of art forms now. Certainly, the obvious ones: music, dance, literature, the books we read, even, dare I say, television. Some better, some a little bit better than others, but television is definitely, an art form. Film, textile, fashion, all of those things, take it in. It's not just the paintings. And culture for me is a little bit different. I guess it's more around, it is around traditions and beliefs, and ideas. It's a little less tangible and a bit more organic, I guess, and it's sort of all around us. And for me, in terms of the relationship between the two, it's usually that it's within art that we acknowledge culture, or we preserve it, or we talk about it in interesting and creative ways. So it could be, our history, stories, the food we eat, architecture, our language, as I said, traditions and beliefs and those types of things. It's sort of our things that we value and important. And it's often through creating art that we tend to sort of have a greater understanding of our culture and preserve it. It's probably the easiest way to sort of give you an overview of my thoughts on it.
Great. And because I think, this is really important for people. I think for people to understand the opportunities that might be presented to them as a tourism business, is that art is not just the painting on the wall. It is a multifaceted, all senses kind of experience or opportunity for people. And, certainly, I've come from a background of developing heritage tourism strategy for South Australia, and in terms of that space. And when people talk about, well, what is heritage? And my answer always is, it's the things that we can look at and touch and see and feel, but it's also the stories we tell about ourselves and our communities. And so that storytelling component is also, it's not a thing that you can, pick up, but it's a very important part of that space. And I think, that it's not just one thing. It's not about working with a visual artist, but it could be about working with, a whole range of different providers to really enhance businesses. So that's probably a nice segue then into our next question around the conversations that you and I have had, and that we're both very enthusiastic about being cultural tourists when we travel. And so, so we sort of, I guess, have discussed that arts and culture forming part of the visitor experience, whether we're going on a tour or we're staying somewhere or we're visiting, an attraction, can feel like a very obvious connection or part of the visitor experience for us. But why, in your, your very professional and also personal opinion, do you think tourism businesses should look to work with arts and culture providers and practitioners? And what do you think the real key benefits are for them in tourism businesses in their business?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think that, all of the research and data suggests that tourists are now, more than ever looking to connect to places. So there's lots of repetition, I think, in the tourism industry. We can go just about anywhere in the world and get pretty good food and wine, great accommodation, and those sort of fairly sort of standard fare. And even, on a tour of a city and those sorts of things, they're all pretty standard. I think, I did a trip in Europe a few years ago, and I think just about every city has a hop on, hop off bus now, that, one of those big yellow or red buses, and you go around on. So I think now they're sort of looking for a more nuanced experience of a place, and people want to feel like they're local, or they've gotten to know something interesting and unique about a place when they're there. And the reason being, it makes it more memorable. They get a deeper understanding and feel a bit more connected to something. And it gives them better value. They feel like they've had a better holiday, and they'll go home and feel like they've been somewhere different to their normal lives. From a business perspective, why you want to cater to that cohort, I think, again, the data is absolutely sound in terms of people that engage with cultural tourism activities tend to spend more money by quite a significant amount, and they tend to stay longer. They also, for me, even more importantly, they tend to talk more about it. So when they go home from their holiday, they're more inclined to tell people about it because they remember it. It was something quite unique and interesting to them. So they'll tell their friends and family. And that, as we all know, is one of the best sort of marketing tools that we can have. So the fact that they're going away and telling everyone about it, to me, is, it's absolute gold. And also they'll come back, I think, is the other thing, because they feel a connection to place, which again, from a business perspective is really, really important. They feel this sort of sense of connection with you that sort of grows a sense of loyalty and understanding of place, and they tend to connect with it a bit more. So it just makes good financial sense, really. And it's like any other investment, that from a business perspective, if you invest in it, it will provide returns. It's just a bit hard to capture, I guess, in your business models. Oh, can't hear you.
I put myself on mute.
There we go. Please don't tell me there's a technical fault.
What do you think are some of the biggest myths or misconceptions about arts and culture?
Sure, yeah.
That you think it might be holding businesses back from sort of stepping more into this space?
Yeah, sure. I think people worry about the cost. Absolutely. Yeah. So people think that, arts is expensive. And look, I'm all for paying artists properly, and they are professionals. Many of them have trained and been to university and spent many years honing their craft and their talent. So, it absolutely is important to pay them. But again, it's all about a business decision, and it's about sort of what's your return on investment. So if you invest a certain way, you'll certainly find those returns come back to you in spades, I think. A lot of people, because they're not comfortable talking about art and they sort of, I'm not creative, I think that they worry that people, that they'll talk to an artist and they'll feel silly, or that they sort of won't know what they're on about. And for me, I think that people underestimate themselves. For one, they engage, 99.9% of the population engage with creative pursuits every day, whether it's reading books, listening to music, watching film, all of those things. So that, people are very comfortable around stories and that sort of thing. So don't underestimate yourself on that front, I guess. And also, I guess, in terms of that expertise thing, I get a plumber around to do something. I've got no idea what they're on about half the time, but I still know that I've got to get them in and they can help me do what I need to do. And I ask lots of questions and I ask for suggestions and that's fine. But for some reason, people sort of worry that, artist is this sort of clever academic sort of persona. And I don't think that's the case. So I think they're probably the two that it'll cost too much and I won't know what they're on about, sort of thing, probably the main ones.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think it is a really important point to drive home, isn't it, in that engaging, and we'll talk about some of this later on, but engaging the artist or a cultural practitioner is no different from engaging a plumber. And, I think, I don't know, maybe it's a legacy of our education that art's always presented as some kind of, or cultural experiences are always presented as some kind of highbrow, inaccessible, or traditionally that's been the case. I think if you look at things like Illuminate, which is going on in Adelaide at the moment, that is an artistic experience. It is and it's a very accessible, very tangible, all ages and backgrounds are engaging with that, but they don't necessarily think that they're actually engaging with art. But all of those installations are delivered by artists and they're a creative expression of something. So
absolutely, yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask a stupid question, I think is probably...
Well, none of the questions are stupid.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think artists will love that discussion. And, I've never met an artist yet that doesn't enjoy the sort of, thinking and talking about ideas and possibilities and stories. So, yeah, just, don't be afraid.
Excellent. Well, let's take that idea of possibility and let's see if we can spark some possibilities and some ideas.
Sure.
And just going back through your work or your travels or just what you've seen, through research, either here, internationally, what do you think are some really outstanding examples of where you've seen tourism, a really traditional sort of tourism site, traditional tourism, sector business, and arts and culture working well together?
Yeah, sure. Look, I had to think about this one. And look, there's a lot. And I guess I was trying to think of some of the more accessible ones, because I know that a lot of tourism operators are small businesses. So it's all very well for some of the big operators. But so one of the ones I saw that I loved quite a few years ago, probably 10 years ago now, was a small winery. And they wanted to create an artwork as a legacy to the original founders of the vineyard. And they worked with an artist, a mosaic artist, that was creating a mosaic work within, based on an old photograph of the two old vignerons that were, in the vineyard. It was an old black and white picture. But what they did was they got her to come in and actually work and create it within the cellar door, so that everyone that walked through the door basically came over and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And no. So it gave them the opportunity to tell the story about, both from the people working behind the counter and the artists, to talk about the story of the vineyard and the history of the place. So it was that trigger. People could sit down and actually, mosaic's a very accessible art form. People were able to sit down and actually place a tile if they wanted to. And what that created for them, again, more memorable. So it was a different experience that they had from any other cellar door that they would have walked in. And most people come to the region and, go to half a dozen. So this would have been a different experience from any other. So more likely to remember it and have a more memorable experience. But they had people come back in and, repeat visitation that would come in and actually look at the artwork, the completed artwork that would then featured in the cellar door and say, oh, when I was here, I put that little piece in. And they remembered that, and they felt, again, it just created this much greater connection with them. And plus they had this great, beautiful artwork to display in their cellar door that was original and unique and different, and told a great story. So that's a sort of a simple one. I love big sculpture and again within landscapes, in Victoria, a lot of the big wineries there have great sculpture shows. Again, brings in many people that wouldn't generally come through to their business, and they come to have a look at the art, and it's quite a spectacle. I went to a long lunch with a resident poet who literally created some poetry. We were all asked to sort of provide little snippets and words, and he would sort of wander around and listen to bits of conversations, and he actually wrote a work and then delivered it at the end, which was really fun. Live theatre and music, dinner deals and those types of things, and packaging, I think for me is a really obvious one. So, if there's some live music going on, and not necessarily in your venue, but in one nearby, and how you can package that up. Even, for a small B&B, working with an artist that might offer workshops and studio experiences, and creating a package where they come for the day and, they do a workshop and then they stay in your accommodation and they go somewhere else for dinner, and creating those, there's quite a few of those around. I'll talk about Bungaree in the Clare Valley, which is a great one. Again, if anyone's been there, they have a great sort of little electronic storytelling mechanism around the place that you can listen to. So it's really low, labour intensive for them. It doesn't necessarily involve a tour. People can just get the map and wander around themselves. So that's a really interesting one, and get a much deeper experience of the heritage. So they're really taking advantage of that as well. Let's face it, if you want to start off starting off really simply, Sala is a great opportunity. There's lots and lots of businesses, whether it's retailers, wineries, restaurants, B&Bs, having, Sala is a great model. Just, you just can log on to the website. So there's lots of examples of that working really, really well. And I think too, a lot of businesses working with artists to create really great content for their social media as well, and actually recruiting some artists to do some, again, not just some pretty pictures, so great photographer, great artists, but even around the words and the stories and those sorts of things, and making it more human, I guess, is something that artists are really good at, and I've seen done really, really well.
Yeah, I think that's you've really touched on some really great tips there, Maz, in terms of it's about bringing art into your business, but it's also about, you don't have to deliver it. It is about that packaging, and that can be, at a really rudimentary level, it's the old dinner and movie deal, isn't it, in terms of the local pub that you'd buy your cinema ticket, you'd have that bigger experience. So it doesn't have to be complex, and it doesn't have to be about engaging, an artist to develop a bespoke wallpaper that's based on the heritage of your property or anything, although that's a really great, way of doing that. But it can be that, it can be as simple as, accommodation provider in a small community, partnering with the local gallery and the local blacksmith creator to build an experience for their guests that's all in one. And also too, I think that leaning in there that you touched on around digital media, and the digital space is a creative space as well. And even just thinking, I was listening to some stuff last night with the the fallout of the change of Instagram, and it's moving much more towards a video type platform nowadays, and people, because for tourism, Instagram's a very powerful marketing platform because it's very image-based, but what's happening now is that they're moving to a Reels type of a framework, and so static imagery is not getting the traction anymore. So, you know, and there's all these businesses are saying, well, now I've got to invest time into creating video, but partnering with a filmmaker or, you know, a local creative who does create video and does that storytelling is something that I think businesses can really benefit from to, you know, within their marketing space. And also too, storytelling, you know, as we talked about, my passion, storytelling, you know, bringing in someone to help your staff deliver information in a storytelling way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, everyone has some great stories, and what an ask will do is just help you find those, you know, beautiful little nuggets within them that, you know, that need to come to the fore and, you know, can be really, really special and interesting, and, you know, make them, just sort of convey them in interesting ways, and absolutely give your staff a little script to work with, or as, you know, a series of scripts to work with that convey these little snippets really quickly and easily, but, you know, make sure those little nuggets are there. Yeah, absolutely. And I have seen that done really, really well.
Great. Yes. Well, as people may have guessed, and as I've shared with Maz, I get really excited about this stuff, and I just get all enthusiastic and want to sort of jump boots into getting experiences developed and all of that sort of stuff. But it can go wrong. Like, you can really make mistakes. And, you know, have you seen it go wrong? Why do you think it can go wrong?
Look,
what are some of the pitfalls?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the thing for me is it's like, as you know, as I keep saying, it is like any other business engagement. And it's, you know, so absolutely having a contract in place, or you know, at least an agreement or something in place where it really does stipulate, one, you know, around your expectations and what the outcomes you expect, and also timeframes. I'm the first to admit that creatives can take a bit more time sometimes, and can get lost in their work, and you know, can take a bit longer. So timeframes are really, really good. I need a deadline to work to. I'm a shocker.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, so making those. The other one is around just copying things. That people see something that works really well somewhere else and just tries to pick it up and replicate it in their own business. And I think that can create real issues. One around, you know, copyright and you know, the legalities of that, but often it doesn't necessarily translate as well. And I'm all for not reinventing the wheel. If you see something working really, really well somewhere and go, oh, I think that would work for me, consider that, but unwrap it and unpack it and rebuild it in the context of your own business and your own place. Don't just sort of try and, you know, plonk it in and assume that it will work. So, you know, I think that can be a real challenge. And there's a bit of, I reckon I can do that. So people see artwork or experiences and go, yeah, that doesn't look too hard. And one of the things around really great art experiences and cultural things are the sort of sense of craftsmanship around them, and that really, really, you know, carefully refined idea that is then articulated really cleverly, or presented, you know, really beautifully. So sometimes, you know, the amateur stuff is interesting and nice, and if it's again created in the context of that, like it's just about people participating and having a go in a community context, that's really lovely. But if you're trying to get something that looks really slick and professional, the getting the professional help is a much better idea. That the having a go yourself can sometimes not necessarily work out as well as what you'd think. And the other thing, I guess, you know, treating it like any other business decision, as I keep saying, like really work out what you expect to get out of it. If you're increasing visitation, raising your profile on social media, whatever, you know, actually make sure that you're measuring where you started and where you ended up, and what your investments got for you, because there's nothing more than then paying the bill and thinking, bloody hell, what am I getting out of it? If you've got some sense of being able to measure it, you will feel much more satisfied about it.
Yeah. So the next question, and that's a really great, you know, you've kind of touched on some of it there, you know, like, let's imagine I'm a small tourism business. You know, it's me and my partner, and, you know, we're running a very small operation, you know, and we're all of the challenges that tourism businesses are faced with, what are some of the smaller things I could do to bring arts and culture into my guest experience, do you think, in terms of, are there some really quick wins? And also too, how do I then step into that space of thinking, I want to engage someone, how do I work with, what do I need to do?
Yeah. Research is great. And because we have the world at our fingertips, literally, having a look at other people's offerings all over the world, don't restrict it to Australia. There's such good content out there all across Europe, South America. So really, really have a look around and see what others are doing. And again, you start off small and simple. Like you don't need to, like I said, if you want to introduce some storytelling and those sorts of things, you can start off really, really small by just introducing some different language into your printed collateral or your social media collateral. And again, look for things that are already happening. Like I said before, SAL is a really great example. Like, it's a great platform. You don't have to work too hard to, you're not creating an exhibition off, out of the blue. It's part of a very, very well promoted and well marketed festival. You literally just have to find yourself an artist. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And even the SALA website will help you do that as well. So it's a really great platform. So starting off with something like that, that's a tried and true formula, I think is a really, where there's some resources behind you. Partnering with others, again, if there's again, through packages, but also other small businesses like your own that might benefit from working with an artist. And you quite often, within a place, there's lots of shared stories. So how you can tell those, and even creating, that sense of exploration for people going from one place to another, and those types of things can be really, really interesting. But working with your local history group and finding out a little bit about, even that you might have a restaurant or a B&B or a shop or something, and finding out the history of the building, like who used to live there, and what are the and don't be afraid to sort of create the tall tales and things around it, some of the myths and legends that might come along with that, and how you create a sort of a historian or storyteller can write a really compelling story that your staff can share pretty easily, or you can incorporate it into your menus if you're a restaurant or a cafe. All sorts of things. Again, working with First Nations is fantastic, understanding the dreaming stories and creating little motifs that might appear throughout the place is another really interesting one. And even, creating, if you're in a position where you need merchandise, it's really, really easy to get online now and, order 50 stubby holders made in China with a, ready-made design on them. But have a think about, I'm all for getting the, the unique stubby holder, but, getting an artist to actually create the design and using that design as something quite unique that's relevant, again, to your, to the place and the position that your business is in, again, is a really simple way, to connect people back to your business. And you're engaging with an artist, again, it's going to be more interesting and more unique. So starting off small is probably the best one. And as I said, be open-minded about it, I guess.
Yeah. And, you talked about, sort of where you can find, where you can go to find artists or cultural, practitioners or providers, where else? How do I find an artist? How do I engage them? What do I do?
How do I find an
ad out? What's the?
I know. And it can be a bit tricky. And I will admit, again, some artists, in the art world, that quite often we're not all that good at marketing ourselves and putting ourselves out there. So sometimes it can be a bit tricky, but there's usually there's often a lot of word of mouth. So using your social media connections and say, hey, I'm interested in working with an artist on something, or we're looking at a few different ideas, and putting it out on social media, you'll no doubt get some recommendations there. And most communities there'll be some sort of, Facebook or Instagram page that's, I know that there is in the Barossa and just about most regions. And, in the city, there's loads of sort of those types of social media platforms that will have artist networks. I'd definitely talk to your local council. So councils engage artists often for lots of different things and have relationships with them. So they quite often will have databases and can provide some suggestions. Lots of Councils now are interested in fostering creative industries and working, and have cultural development or arts coordinators and those in roles that can actually provide business with some advice and support. And same goes for sort of tourism development people, like either, through councils that often have tourism development officers, or your regional tourism officers if you happen to be out in the regions. If you've got a local gallery nearby, particularly looking for through public and community galleries, you'll find they have pretty good lists and databases as well, and can, generally there'll be someone there that can make some recommendations or give you some ideas about who to talk to. So it is a bit tricky. It's not just like going to the phone book and looking under A for art, or A for artist, but yeah, there's some good, and RDA is another one. If you're around the regions, Regional Development Australia, often, again, they're interested in small business development. So, artists are that, and quite often will have some lists and databases of who's around and who's working in, whether you're looking for some live music or, a really great designer to create something for you, they tend to have a pretty good contact list on that front. So that would be my suggestions.
Yeah. And then to think about it like you're engaging any other kind of a provider. So it's about being clear on what you want, having a contract or a brief or a contract that's agreed to, and understanding fees as well, because as you said, this is a sector, they're professionals, they need payment. So and I'm kind of, got to go double pronged here. So it's about being that structure. Just because it's art doesn't mean that there's not structure in how you engage. Yep. And also too, language, like there's commission, like there's all of that sort of stuff too. Like, can you sort of, we've talked about different languages. Have you got any sort of hot tips around language that, or is
Sure. Yeah. And there are, people talk about commissioning artists rather than, but to commission artists really, again, is just like a contract. If I'm going to commission an artist, it means that I have a conversation with them and provide them with some information, and whether that's written down or not, I would advise to write it down like anything. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in a formal document, but even a few dot points in an email and saying, hey, here's my ideas. This is what we're about. This is, a few things that are important to us around our brand, or around our business and who we are as people. So again, that might be stories about your environmental values. It might be stories about your family history and how that relates to your business. It might be a story about your flora and fauna that is part of your business, a whole bunch of stuff. So you might give them a few themes and ideas to work with. They'll come back to you with some with a proposal, which is just like a quote and saying, here's what I think I could do, here's what I'd like to create, and absolutely with a proposed cost, and you can then negotiate with them just like you would anyone else. And then absolutely getting an agreement in place. And again, places like your local council and even your small business office and your economic development offices and those sorts of things, if you're not sure about having a good agreement in place, they'll have some templates for you to put in place. And again, making sure you've got those timelines. But yeah.
And I guess the same advice would be around if you're looking at packaging with a provider, like that it's the same kind of conversation that any sort of tour operator or accommodation provider or whatever, if they're doing that packaging, just treat it as you normally would a packaging experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having a conversation with all of the, various different parties involved, if there's more than just the two of you, making sure that everyone knows what their responsibilities are in relation to that. The package is going to be available through all of you. Is there one point of sale? What does each person get out of it? What are the marketing responsibilities? Are you all expected to promote it, or is one person in charge of that? All of those sorts of things should be hashed out so that everyone's pretty clear. And again, around, you've got some really good, consistent brand information getting out there. You're not confusing. There's nothing worse, as we all know, we've all had it as a visitor, and you go somewhere and you ask some questions and someone just says, I don't know. And you're sitting there thinking, well, you've advertised this. This is your thing. And so just to make sure that, all of that information is in concrete and you're ready to go to share it with your punters is really, really important.
Great. we'll sort of we'll turn over to our lovely group that's joining us today and get them to sort of see if they've got any questions that they'd like to ask you. But before we do that, what are your sort of insider hot tips around
Sure.
Yeah.
Look, I reckon be open-minded and don't be afraid. But yeah, keep an open mind and sort of allow artists to do what they do well, to inspire you and be creative and dazzle you. That's what we're good at. Again, thinking about what you're trying to achieve and having your end goal in mind. So is it about, again, greater hit rates on your webpage? Is it about repeat visitation? Is it about just higher visitation? Is it about people staying longer and spending more? And all of the understanding, what you really want to get out of it from a business perspective, I think is really, really important. And again, it might be around some of that periphery stuff and like you're just trying to create a legacy experience for your family to preserve your family history or something that's linked to your business. So, but just be really, really clear from the outset. And that helps the artists as well in terms of understanding what you're trying to achieve and creating something in the context of that. And yeah, just that, again, we've talked about it before, Linda, that treat it like any other business arrangement, have a contract in place and be really, really clear about that. And give it a bit of time as well. Artists, it doesn't, just happen in a sort of moment. I'd say just, make sure that you give yourself enough space and time to sort of let ideas sit. And even when they come back with their ideas, mulling those over and those sorts of things and make it a two-way conversation is really, really important.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Maz. But you're not off the hook yet. Now I'll just see. No one's put any sort of questions in the chat function. Maybe we've answered everything, or maybe everyone's still warming up on this cold morning. But does anyone have any questions? And you're more than welcome. I'm not sure if there's a put your hand up function on this, or if you just want to, because you can actually come off mute to ask a question. So Finn, I might need to get you to help me
some of that.
Sort of manage this part of the process. As I said, I'm new. This is my first one. I was all panicked about just making sure tech worked this morning, hence my forgetful start. So yeah.
I think people should be able to take themselves off mute.
Yeah. So does anyone want to jump in with a question?
Stun them all into silence.
Yeah.
If anyone wants, has even a good story to share, that whether it's worked really well for them or a horror story where they wouldn't do it again, that's always handy. Or if you've got something in mind and you want to throw your idea out there, and we can have a little crit group right here. We're happy to do that.
Yeah. Any ideas? Anyone thinking about anything around what they might do? And I think I'll just share some of, I guess, while we're waiting for someone to shut me up with a question, I'll just share some of the stuff that I've seen. As I said, I get really passionate about this, and some of the stuff that I've been involved in as well. And I think it's really simple. Often I think when we think about branding and design and signage and brochures and stuff, and you did touch on this, Maz, around, we often go to the graphic designer. And obviously they're creatives as well, but sometimes it's around getting in. I was working on a heritage site, and we were trying to develop the interpretation for it, which is obviously the storytelling part. But then in terms of the background of the signage and the printed material that supported that, we got an artist to come in and spend some time at the site. And they sort of went away and came back with some patterns, with some background design that we could use on all printed material that actually was really unique and reflected that site. And another place of importance to migrant communities, we got designs that reflected cultural, artistic traditions of various communities, so that it wasn't a really overt statement of culture or art. It sort of sat in the background. And then I think even the things, that I think we see it all the time. We go into a cafe or we stay at a place, and we've got local photography or artwork hanging on walls that you can purchase. Gift shops, gift shops are great places where you can be supporting local artists or engaging with local artists, and they can be developing product specifically for your business. And then my most favourite kind of cultural experience recently in this space was, in Tasmania, and going to a heritage, one of the convict sites there. And instead of doing the traditional tour or the audio tour, I participated in a theatrical. It was a 40-minute long, presented by someone who's there, who's an actor. It was a professional actor who presented a story of the different characters who had lived at that site. And my partner, who was with me, who is a man who is not, he doesn't seek out cultural experiences necessarily, but he walked away from that saying that was like, his mind was blown. And that's the thing he keeps telling all of his workmates and friends about from his trip to Tasmania. And he would have never sought out that experience or picked it up, but it's the one thing that's really standing in his mind. So, no one's shutting. Please, people, please stop me from talking. Any questions? I think not, Maz. I think
no, that's all right.
Yeah, I think.
But I think you're right. I think that sometimes it doesn't need to be big and bold. That sometimes you can do some really. I remember working with a paper artist again for a lunch with a winery, and they created these gorgeous little sort of sculptures for the table. That were fantastic, and that they actually, I think, auctioned them off at the end of the lunch as a bit of a fundraiser for the local school. And they were, again, really simple, ephemeral sort of artworks that people wanted to take home, and they raised a bit of money out of it. And again, it just made this sort of really, really beautiful sort of setting, which was fantastic. So I agree. You don't need to. And again, even going to the restaurant where you've had, they've got some glassware or some crockery, and it's been created by, again, a local artist, and it's quite unique, is really, really lovely, and just gives that sort of sense of connection to the landscape and those sorts of things as well. But again, I can't sort of emphasize enough that value of the story. I remember going to a restaurant not long ago, and I said and it was in an historic building, and I said to the waitress, so tell me a little bit about such and such. And she sort of looked at me blankly and said, I actually don't know much about it. I went, okay, that's fine. She said, I can ask one of my colleagues. And she did that, and they didn't either. And I thought, how brilliant would it have been if she just then spieled off, this really sort of like, and even as we'd arrived, and it was a quite upmarket restaurant. So as we'd arrived, and they sort of welcomed us and even said, you're on such and such country, you're on paramount country, and welcome. And, you're currently sitting in an old butter factory, that was built in 1862. It's been in our family for a generation, blah, blah, blah. I would have just sort of been, wow, that's great. Thanks. It would have just been a really lovely way to kick off lunch, and made it much more memorable. I would have happily spruiked it more and more. So, those sorts of things, again, doesn't even necessarily involve having to recruit an artist. It's just about you, and integrating your story into things better is really lovely. And people want to hear about that. People are interested.
Do we have any questions at all before we wrap up?
Maz, Kate speaking from Kimbolt Wines. I would just like to say I've been really pleased to hear what you've had to say, the both of you today. It's got my mind racing with all sorts of bits and pieces. One of the things that I hadn't really considered art, but we use in a day-to-day with every single person that walks through the door. We have visual tasting cards that we did and do engage a photographer to create for us, and the customer or client gets to handle that card and turn it over and read a story on the back, look at the picture on the front in reference to what they're tasting, and they are also then allowed to take it with them.
Nice.
And they really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And that's just we consider that quite a small thing, although we were excited about creating it. Very initially, we bring all of the bits and pieces in actuality to the table, but you can't sustain that and keep things looking great and fresh. So this has worked beautifully for us, and again people tell us that they love it and that they haven't seen it before. And so it also helps us more than they realise in terms of tracking through the tasting. All of our tastings are seated and hosted, and sometimes we get a bit lost when you've got multiples on a table too, and they're all doing a different tasting flight. So it's a great tool for us also. But where my head is going to now is something even bigger than that, and I'm wanting to look at something that's sculptural and is user-friendly, and it can be touched and climbed on. We're also recognised as a family-friendly environment, and we get lots of little people on the property, and so far we've made sure we've got things they can engage with and touch and be a part of, and we try as much as we can to keep have them in keeping with nature, but to this point we haven't engaged an artist to develop that further. So that's something I'll be going back to Nicole, as she couldn't be here today because she's in meetings, to talk a bit more about that. Our building is shipping containers, and it's got its own story, and there's a rooftop viewing deck, and people love that. And so I always make sure that all the staff are keyed up or clued up in that story, and because oftentimes people want to hear about that before they even hear about wine.
Yeah, I think that
and the storytelling.
Those visual cards that's a brilliant example. And again, engaging with local photographers and those sorts of things. And it you know, because tasting wine is such a, you know, it's quite an interesting thing unto itself. But it's not just about that sense of taste. There is a whole bunch of other senses that people can take in, and people respond differently to different things. So I might respond differently to music and sound, and you might respond differently to visual stuff. So bringing in that other element's brilliant. I love it. It's great idea.
Great, excellent.
Thank you.
That's great to hear what you're doing, and you know, and what you're thinking about doing as well. That really shows the scale of the opportunity that arts and culture presents for businesses. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to ask or share before we send you all on your merry ways into a productive Thursday? No. All right. I think we'll give everyone, it's 10:54 by my clock, so we won't just fill in time. We'll give some 5 minutes back in your day. But Maz, was there anything that you wanted to leave us with? I think, you know, you've probably left us with so much, but you know, any kind of final point that you just want to ram home?
Yeah. Don't be scared. You know, just talk to people that, you know, other people that work in creative industries, and ask lots of questions. You know, no such thing as a stupid question. They're all, you know, and no such thing as a stupid idea either. You know,
exactly.
I often sort of think the first things I say in the workshops that I do, like, no such thing. Like, and quite often you might shoot for the moon and think you'll never get there. And think that's, you know, the craziest idea, but and you'll eventually get there. Surprisingly, it just sort of takes, you might have to jump through a few different hoops along the way and have a few different iterations of it. But yeah, don't be afraid.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you, Maz, for you know, being so generous in sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your you know, your great experience in this. And you know, I think we're really privileged that we do have someone like yourself available to the industry in South Australia, and certainly, you know, no doubt there are other great talents like you, but that there are people out there who can provide really strong guidance, who, you know, you do sit heavily within the arts and culture world, but you've got a real strong understanding of tourism and what it takes to be successful within tourism as well. And so, you know, for you to be willing and available and happy to share that with us is you know, we greatly appreciate. And I hope everyone's gotten something out of today, or it sparked some ideas. And certainly if you have any sort of further questions or any follow-up that, you know, or you just need some advice, or you're not sure how you contact Sala, I think, you know, one thing that people could consider is that I believe Fringe will soon be taking registrations for venues.
Yeah,
and so, you know, anything can be a fringe venue. So certainly think about how you might be, and that's where really you just provide your venue, and the performer or the artist comes in and does, you know, does the delivery of that experience. So yeah, we're happy, you know, Tix is always here to answer any questions or point you in the right direction if we can't find that. So thank you again, Maz, and thank you.
My
everyone.
pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.